We are now streaming live on Facebook for yet another edition of After the Con. It's going to be an exciting episode. I have three outstanding authors with me who just have done some amazing things in their career. We have Kimberly Unger. She's an amazing writer of science fiction, fantasy, and also works for Oculus as a game designer. We have Mr. Rob Hayes, grimdark fantasy author extraordinaire and winner of Spiffbone 2017, and most recently that I'm aware of, getting great reviews for his novel Never Die. And we have the infamous and very famous Mr. Andy Gavin, founder of Naughty Dog Games, writer of novels, writer of plays, and restaurateur. And of course, I'm Brian D. Anderson, and we're happy to have everybody here. How's everybody doing today?
Not too bad.
So far, so good.
So far. All right. So I'll tell you what, we're going to go around and why don't everybody say what you got going on right now? I mean, assuming there's something anybody can be doing with all the COVID mess going around. Well, why don't we start with ladies first?
All right, fabulous. Well, I am, let's see, I live in California. So most of what we're doing is hiding not only from COVID, but we are also now hiding from the wildfires. So that's, granted, this is California. We do burn down on average once every 5 years and have my entire lifetime. But it's not any fun every time it happens. So that is our current state is not dying at the moment, which is,
Do you have any books coming out?
I do. So I have, my debut novel is Nucleation, and it's coming out in November. So I'm just starting like that sort of promo run up, like sticking my face in everywhere. And I don't actually know what I'm doing with this. So I'm talking to all the authors that I know and going, hey, so what did you do? So I'm gathering ideas. So if you guys have any suggestions, that would be excellent. And Andy, I am delighted. The deeper I get into writing fiction as someone who's been working in the games industry, the more people I'm finding from our industry who are crossing over, which is just freaking cool.
I find they're quite similar in a lot of ways, particularly.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Any creative project has a certain similarity, the sort of like pacing to it and the kind of push you have to give to, sort of deliver it.
It does. We don't have to do, for a novel, you don't have to do quite as many side quests. There's not quite as much.
It's more like a solo grind.
Exactly.
All right, so moving around the screen.
Yep.
And on my screen, we'll go down to Mr. Rob Hayes. Rob, what do you got going on? What do you got new release wise?
Yeah, I mean, I've recently released a trilogy, all 3 books in 3 months, basically.
Man, you're an animal.
That was a lot of work. The bags under my eyes. That's from like months ago. I just haven't managed to get rid of them yet.
Was that done serially, or you had them all written and then you just staged the?
Oh no, I had them all written. I wrote book 1, which is there along the razor's edge. I wrote that in end of 2016, I think it was. Is that right? That sounds about right. And then I wrote books 2 and 3 sort of the next year. And then I've just been sitting on them for a couple of years, and I thought, you know what, let's get them released. And we'll do it all over the course of 3 months, because another author convinced me that was a good idea. It was exhausting, but yeah, so that's what I've got going on. Other than that, I'm being a hermit because we're not allowed to leave the house. Well, we are allowed to leave the house, but it seems dangerous.
Oh, great. How about you, Andy? What you got hitting?
Well, right now is a weird time. I've done a lot of things. 20 plus years of making video games, 2 published novels, a couple tech companies, failed restaurateur, also a master gelatician, amateur historian, amateur photographer. Like, really, I've been hiding at home from the virus, and like teaching my son to program, leveling up my cooking big time, like definitely getting up towards level 60 on my on that. No major projects like about to release, like kind of strange holding pattern here, but I slightly bored and need to get something going.
After all those credentials you just listed off, I really feel like shit about myself now. Like, what have you done? I'm like 48. What have you done with your life? Well, you know.
Well, you know.
It's exactly it.
And as for yours
More this year.
truly, I have
It's not been the
that. That's out of Tor Books. I have, of course, Fire Book 2 of The Sorcerer's Song has just come out this past month on the 11th. And I'm on the cusp of finishing the final book in the Goblin Chronicles sequel, 2-book sequel, and then I got 4 more books to write. So, yeah.
That's a high-class problem, having 4 books lined up.
Oh yeah, sometimes you look up at the mountain of work and it's just like, oh shit. And I mean, it all starts with one step at a time, but sometimes it's just hard. Taking that first step, you still look up and the mountain is still, it looked like it grew a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem actually at the beginning, and then having done it before, you know how big the mountain is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually more daunting than when you're first approaching it sometimes. Like,
oh yeah, but
you're anticipating even all that post. It's one thing to like when you first start, say a book, you're like, oh no, I wrote 2,500 pages today. That's only however many days to actually like finish the length of the book. Sure, but then there's the 7 redrafts and all the work actually getting it out there and sold and all that.
Well, it took me an hour to write. I thought it would take an hour to read. Oh man!
I've got about. I think I'm currently writing in about 4 different series. I just keep starting new ones, and then I'm like, at some point, I'm gonna have to go and write the book 2s and the book 3s.
Yeah, that can be daunting too, because you get tired of you spend a year or something on one, and you're like, I want to do something a bit different.
Yep.
That's just it. It's sort of like I keep writing like the first book or whatever, and then I'm like, right, I'll stick that to the side before I get to editing, and I'll do something else for a while. I don't know, I'll start a new book.
That was a huge factor in video games, because it would be something like when we did Crash Bandicoot in the 90s, we started working on 94, and by like 99 we had 4 games, but we were so tired of working 24/7 on this one same thing essentially. But the financial pressure is so huge to bring out sequels when something's doing well. At that point, we're just we just got to start a new franchise. Like, it was maybe not the perfect financial move, like worked out. But it's just like you can't spend your entire life working on the same thing. There are a few authors or creators that do that. Maybe like, I think it's like Piers Anthony, up to like 45 Xanth novels or something.
Yeah.
What was that book Piers Anthony wrote that just sort of got him kind of blacklisted? Because I remember loving Piers Anthony's.
I mean, just huge.
Huh?
He was huge in the early 80s.
Oh no, I read all the Xanth novels. I loved it. A Spell for Chameleon when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, was one of my favorite novels. And that was around the time that Terry Brooks did his debut with Magic Kingdom for Sale.
Oh yeah, that was the comedic comedy one.
Yeah, it was on the cover. It had the dog with the spectacles on, the sheepdog with the spectacles. It was, but it was a great,
really good cover art too.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, well, that was all Daryl K. Sweet, I think, and he just does these charming covers.
Well, I'll tell you, the person me and Rob use is a guy named Felix Ortiz, and Felix is. Now, this is actually a pretty good story, and I've told it in other episodes, but it bears repeating. He had done work for Rob and several other authors, but he had been trying to break into traditional. Yes, yeah, he did that, and he did that,
and he did those.
Yeah.
Basically just have him on retainer.
But the thing is, he had done some fan art for Nicholas Eames back when my editor over at Tor, Lindsay Hall, when she was over at Orbit, she like saw some of his fan art for Kings of the Wild. And fast forward a couple of years, with book one, The Barge Blade was coming out, or was in editing, and we were getting it all ready, and they were thinking about doing cover art. She goes, "Hey, you know, I saw this this guy, Felix Ortiz. I saw his artwork, and back and told me about the fan art, and shows me the stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, the guy's great, of course. You know, if Tor will use him." And we were pretty confident the art department would say yes if we asked, because he was that he's obviously that good, but we didn't know for sure. And he's actually the Spiffbo group. There's an online Facebook group. He was a part of that. I didn't know Felix, but I'd seen him before, and I'd seen and I knew he was doing covers for folks. But for like 2 months, I know he's about to do a cover with a major big major publisher, and I can't say a damn word to him about it.
Secrets, man.
Well, I mean, what if I said something and then they decide to go another direction? Now I'm a giant asshole for saying something. I mean, but he does fantastic work. Who did that? I'm seeing your background. I remember that was from I can't remember.
Cover, this one?
Huh?
On Time cover, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Cliff Nielsen. He did both my covers, and he's done tons and tons of stuff, like the most recent Narnia editions, like he did. And
oh wow. Well, now did you self-publish that one?
yeah,
Okay.
I have an agent, and like this one almost was sort of sold, but I didn't really like the deals, and like it was a weird circumstance because I offered through my agent like to match marketing dollars with like a real publisher 1-to-1, and if they would commit to a certain minute, and like they did not know how to deal with that. Like they're they just don't think out of the box. Like,
well, my agent does real well with self-publishing. It's like she'll try to sell it, you get a chance to sell it. If she doesn't do it, if she doesn't get it, then go on your own, and she'll try to sell the subsidiary rights, because there's a lot of money in the subsidiary rights. Those things, that stuff builds up. Problem is now with all the rights wars for audio anymore, if you sell your audio rights, you're sunk.
Yeah, no chance of getting a tribe deal for a book where there's no audio rights.
Yeah.
But to be honest, you can sell. There are plenty of authors who are selling audio rights to, like Audible directly or the like, and they're making an absolute killing from that. So
I've done it.
Yeah.
I have the distinction of being the first indie author in history that was completely indie to get a 6-figure audio only deal.
awesome.
impressive.
Wow.
I wasn't the last, and mine wasn't the most money, but I was the first. And
Audible,
man.
nothing these days.
Audible was shelling out. I mean, they were just throwing out money left and right. I think they were just trying to beat the crap out of the publishers. I mean, and
Get them with the wallet.
yeah. Well, they got that Bezos money, man.
So much. Like every podcast in the known universe is sponsored by Audible. I mean, it's like
All right. Well, not mine. Oh.
Yet.
either that or Squarespace.
Yes, Brian.
Well, I mean, I don't have a lot of fans on my. I just started recently putting a lot of stuff on my on my YouTube channel, and so it's. And then I got ill with a bunch of health issues, and then it sort of died off. So, but that's why I broadcast live to my great fans out there on my Facebook page. Be a little bit of a self-promoting whore for just a moment.
Well, it's all right. You're not alone there. I mean, I do a podcast these days, and they don't sponsor us either. So, Audible, if you're listening, feel free to sponsor Wizards, Warriors, and Words.
Yeah, I'll definitely shill for you. I can be bought.
Yeah. Get a little feedback loop going.
Yeah, right. Oh man, it's like when people used to make fun of who was that? Who wrote 50 Shades of Grey? I'm like, you know what? She found a niche and
she
made
filled
a
it.
ton of money. I read some of it, and I was not exactly what I would call impressed.
It's
But
one of the phenoms, kind of like Twilight.
Yeah. Oh God.
They fall in I mean, they're totally different books, but they fall in like the similar category where they're just sort of like, they're not terribly well written, but they were right place, right time, hit a certain whatever, je ne sais quoi, and just like,
Oh yeah, I have a meme with Blade coming up behind Bella and Edward, and how we wish Twilight would have ended.
when Twilight, I was just when I read them, the prose was painful. I mean, I kind of sort of why they're appealing, but then they're just so structurally lame. Like the first book, like she takes the climatic action and it doesn't even occur. It's so unimportant to her that like the protagonist is knocked out and wakes up after the fact, and you hear the what happened.
Yeah.
Like, and then there's no, like when you break them down to movies, what is it? Breaking Dawn Part 1 being the first half of that novel, it literally has no conflict in the entire novel.
Yeah.
Standpoint.
Except for in Bella's magical power of getting hot guys to like her for inexplicable reasons.
That's a YA thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if it's that way, but there was the whole period where it was like all YA stories had to have a female lead and then two guys after her because there had to be that love triangle.
Well, I mean, and one who was, by the way, like 100 years old, watches her when her sleep, because that's not creepy at all.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's a message we want to send.
But it was an odd
Old
triangle.
men watching young girls when they sleep is perfectly fine.
Only in book 2 does Jacob actually have a vague chance. You know, for the entire rest of the series, he's like a very weak corner to the triangle.
Well, I'll tell you, some of the best story writing to me has been in the Final Fantasy series of games, and that's this kind of bringing what you and Kimberly's, you know, one of y'all area of expertise into play. Like Final Fantasy X to me is the single best storyline ever written in a game. I know that's arguable, and anybody, you know, because everybody has their preference, but it inspired me to write another series called The Veil, and which I didn't do it like Gamelit where you level up and stuff like that. It was just like I used all the tropes that you see in those games and all the character types and now the way they layer stuff, and I wrote it in an original world. But Final Fantasy X, I mean, there's some games I just don't get the appeal, like Kingdom Hearts. I know people love that game, but I'm watching my son play it. I'm like, okay, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Auron from Final Fantasy, you know, all, you know, how does this all work? You know, I mean,
you can throw a lot of stuff in and have it still work. Like, I think World of Warcraft works, but it's not really a story-based thing exactly. But it has every trope in the fantasy, you know, universe thrown in there. But it totally works.
Well, I mean, when you were starting, what year did you start Naughty Dog?
Well, we met and started trying to make games in '83.
Mm-hmm.
Our first one was published, I think, in '85. Mm-hmm. But it was the two of us, like my partner Jason and I, through the '80s, and then we had bigger games in like '87, '89, '91, and then in '93 we sort of started doing it kind of full time while I was in grad school. Mm-hmm. By '94 we started hiring people, and I really like, well, that's when we started Crash Bandicoot.
So you're an overnight success in a mere 12 years.
It's a very long night.
I mean, with learning to make games, it's very iterative. Like, if you look behind, you know, even something like Grand Theft Auto 3. Well, there's a reason why there's a 3 on. No one ever goes back and plays or knows about GTA 1 and 2, but they were there. And then
they were better than
that worked on other games too. Yep. So behind big games, or like, you know, before Castle Wolfenstein 3D or Doom.
Oh,
there was like, was it Commander Keen or Captain Keen or
Commander Keen?
Yeah, and you know, so like every team has these sort of starter things. Like you can't just, whether it's the design or technical or the art style or whatever, you can't kind of come out of nowhere very easily and just think you could switch from something else or whatever. But a lot of sort of legacy and learning to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about you, Kimberly? What do you where do you fall on, like? Do you prefer the action games or do you prefer the RPGs? I mean, you're with Oculus, man. So y'all are doing some crazy stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm with Oculus now. And I have to correct you. I'm actually not on the game design team at Oculus. I'm on the sourcing team. So I get to judge everybody else's stuff these days.
Oh, you get to like play games for a living?
That is a large part of what I do. I make it a point to try out everything that comes across my desk, whether it's my particular purview or not, because I can't make an assessment of the team or anything like that unless I've been in it, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been a gamer forever, a video game player forever. I've been designing video games, at a much lower rent level, I think, ever than Andy has worked at. But since
our first games were pretty low rent.
80, probably 88 is right around where I started. So and I was, the first game I did was for the Apple IIe.
Oh wow!
We did several Apple II games.
Oh yeah. And it never went anywhere. I was working at the time. I don't know if you know him. I was working. Dave Etherton and I went to school together. So he handled the heavy lifting on the engineering side, and I handled the design and the art on it. Back when you had to like type in hplot, and then type in your color value. It was like plotting your art out on a sheet of graph paper.
Oh. We actually, in our early games, the art was drawn using Nibble, like just the characters 0 through 9 and A through F, like in a text.
Oh my God! There's a I think it's on Netflix. A series called Game Over.
Yeah, that's on my queue to watch. I haven't watched it yet though.
And I was watching that, and it showed the beginning of Final Fantasy, what I mentioned before, and it was like you see the original drawings for all the monsters, and and then they became these short, squat, fat, because everything was an 8-bit, I'm like, oh my God! But a while when my son was a toddler, I mean, he couldn't even talk. He was just learning to walk, which. Oddly enough, he tried to learn to walk before crawl because he didn't like to crawl. And it took him figuring out that he could crawl faster than he could walk to make him want to crawl.
There you go.
I was working out of town a lot, so when I'd be home, I'd watch him downstairs. This when we were living in New York. And a friend of mine had an old PS1, the original PlayStation, and a bunch of I guess they were pirated. I'm not sure, but he had Final Fantasy 4, 5, 6, and 7 that you could play on these games, and so I played all the way up to Final Fantasy 9, I think it was, and he had all these that you could play. He could play on this game. It had I don't know the technical aspect. Anyway, I sat down there and played all these games, and even the old ones with the really basic graphics. They were fun. They were a lot of fun, even though, and at that time, Final Fantasy X was out, which was way beyond even today it holds up pretty damn good. But still, the stories behind it were a lot of fun, and it really drew you in. And
that's the essence of the JRPG. It's something like there was a point 30, 40 years ago where the JRPG and the Western RPG sort of split topically, and the JRPG focused on story. And the actual gameplay of JRPGs is not actually advanced that much, but the stories were really, really good. And the Western RPGs focused more on atmosphere and gameplay and stuff. Well, I have a hard time with the traditional mechanic of the JRPGs, which is the turn-based, kind of party combat. I do not like. It's really boring. That's my problem with Final Fantasy.
I love it.
I hate this favorite JRPGs are Dark Souls and Bloodborne and stuff, because I like single, action-y kind of single character control combat.
I want to break off for a second. And by the way, if you have any questions for Kimberly, Andy, or Rob, type them into the comments, and I'll be see if I can get some in towards the end of into the show. Anyway, so what I'll have to do, by the way, is I'll have to jump off, not off the meeting, but when I switch over to Facebook, I won't be able to hear a damn thing. So I'll have to stand, get the questions.
Maybe like at another time, it's not today. Maybe put that on an iPad or your phone or something, and
yeah, I'm still figuring all this out because I don't, and I have no idea why I get muted when I go to where it's broadcasting live. It doesn't do that on YouTube. It just only does that on, as far as I know, only does that on the Facebook one. Who am I to question what Facebook does? I mean, everybody hates it so much they won't get off it.
Yeah. Well, especially the latest version of it, where everybody's just like, I don't think I've seen a single person who's just like, yes, I like this new version of Facebook.
Oh, I know, new Facebook. I keep turning it off, but supposedly, like in a day or two, like, well, but it's so horrendous. There's literally nothing better about it. Everything is worse.
It just looks different. It doesn't do anything different.
It looks
and it just looks worse. You can't visually parse where anything is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, personally, I fear change. I'm one of them old men that back when I was a kid. I mean, I swear to God, by the time I have grandchildren, if I'm not taking a dirt nap by then, I'll be like, back when I was a kid, we used a joystick and a television.
I like things, but I don't like when some of these innovations and interfaces where they like Microsoft is doing this too. They have a new look to Outlook and other things where they're hiding everything. But you actually want your controls, like you're on a computer program, to be visible, because you have to be able to, see that button. If they're all hidden, it's like, well, where is that button again? Like, I got to find the secret gesture in the corner that brings up the submenu or something. No, you just want to actually do your stuff.
Yeah. If they hide anything from me, I'll just never use it because I'll never find it.
Yeah, but they're moving into this mode of like hiding everything.
Hey, Rob, what do you use to write on? You use Word or you use like Scrivener?
I use Scrivener just because
Because you're smart. Okay, I get it.
No, I'm used to it. They're like if you write sort of like the chapters and then you suddenly decide actually this chapter fits better there, because like it's a problem when you write an epic fantasy, especially.
I've never done that.
And if you have different character, like dealing with like reordering or viewing a particular character stuff in Word is like impossible. And it's super easy.
Well, this is not the first after the con that I've had that I'm the dumbest person in the group. So
You still use Word?
Oh, you're muted for a month. Hey, my son is here. He's going to join after the con because that's what this is. This is a convention, and yes. Sorry. This is my son Jonathan.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Kimberly Unger, Rob Hayes, and Mr. Andy Gavin. Well, he's fanboying.
Big time.
He is super into gaming, so I could not have this show without him being able to come over and, Actually, this kid is responsible for my whole entire career, and that's no kidding. Kimberly, you're muted for some reason. Rob, can you hear?
I can't hear.
And Andy?
No, she's muted. I can hear you.
So
Muted.
it's only you.
But it's not. I don't see the mute icon. So maybe
I have a mute icon right here, and it's not pushed. So
it's
she's
not on the Zoom side. It's probably on the microphone or something.
Yeah, it's not on me. And not that I would know how to fix it, even if it were.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
There we go.
But anyway, he when he was 7 years old, he came up with the original concept for my first series. And that's the truth.
Sweet.
No, yeah, I was writing a bunch of these weird little short stories that really didn't have any cohesive, anything cohesive. And it wasn't really a story. It was just a bunch of quirky ideas. And you know, he came home. He had just seen Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief like a couple days before, and he said, "Hey, Dad, I got an idea for a story." And what he told me ended up becoming the Gothic Chronicles, and that's not bad. But now he's really into gaming.
Yeah.
Certainly a time.
So he's actually a pretty good writer in his own right. He's not as good as his old man, but he could be. No, I'm serious. You know, what I mean, if he decided to pursue it, I'm sure he could be. I mean, so could most people, though. But anyway, Rob, when you won Spiffbo, I've been wanting to ask, when you won Spiffbo, did you see like a marked increase in the sales of the book that won?
Not really. I mean, there was a few blips here and there, you know, extra boosts, but I mean, there wasn't sort of a pervasive increase in sales. I think it was one of those things where it helped to put my name out there and get me a bit more well known, but there was no massive increase. So
a long game type thing.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then being in it a second time and getting to the final, that's definitely helped. Because it's like, you know, now I can sit there and go, the only person who has ever been in the final twice. And
I've been to the semifinals once.
It's all secret sauce.
Well, you know, with this contest, though, I mean, it's a great contest. It's about as level playing field as you could ever hope for. Because, I mean, what was it? Last year you had Diane Duane in there, and not Brian. Was it Brian Stavely? No, it wasn't Brian Stavely. Who was it? Brian McClellan.
Yeah.
Yeah, he entered, and both of those guys got eliminated, and they're big time authors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you got a bunch of all these people. The only bad thing that could really happen to you is if you write a book and get assigned to either a site or a reviewer who just doesn't like the type of book you've written, and that happens, you know. But that happens anyway, you know. I mean,
at the end of the day, it's not. I mean, yeah, okay, it sucks to get like a bad review in that sense, but it's not a bad thing to happen to you, because simply by entering Spiffbo and having that sort of like extra coverage and those people reading and reviewing your books, you're going to get your book in front of more people. More people are going to know about it.
Well, then you get contacts with all the different review sites. I mean, I'm really good friends with Petros over at Book Nest now, and you know, I know, you know, just getting to know Mark Lawrence, you know, I mean, because he's very open. I don't know why. I still to this day have no idea why Mark Lawrence put so much into this, because he has no specific ties to indie fantasy.
He says it's survivor's guilt. Basically, he feels bad because he managed to get a trad contract and is now, you know, writing books with
I remember seeing his books come on the shelves first time, but was it Prince of Thorn or Prince of Thorns or some shit like that? Was it?
I read that.
Oh yeah, and you know, that was he got in at the right time though. That's when Grimdark was really people starting to take notice of Grimdark, and of course now if it's not Grimdark, they consider it YA. Unless you're Brandon Sanderson, which, you know.
He has his own genre.
Yeah, the Sanderson genre.
In a lot of ways, his genre is this sort of like, it's almost the traditional fan, the big fat, you know, something like the
500-page.
Yeah, what's
tome.
The name of it? The King, you know, the super fat, which I read and loved. Like the Warbringer or whatever it is, but it's, you know, it's not coincidental that he finished up the Robert Jordan books, because it's somewhat in that.
That was a risk, though, man. Oh my God! Can you imagine if he'd have tanked on that? It would have ruined his career.
I mean, his might have been slightly better than the later Robert Jordan ones, but they're all too fat, like the Wheel of Tedium. And it started like the first 5 books.
The Wheel of Tedium. There's some people who are going to be watching this who are not going to be happy with it.
Don't get me wrong, I read them all, and I absolutely adored it for a while. Like, but by the time it got to, I don't know, like book 6 or 7, and like Perrin didn't even appear for like, there was a whole book he missed, maybe 2. Yeah. Like, because the number of different characters was so big that everyone only got maybe 2-3 tops chapters per book, and these are 1,100 page books. It was just too diffuse.
So my favorite character was Matt. I liked him
Yeah, I really
as a
liked him.
character. He was, I think, he's a lot of people's favorite character. He seemed, I think, of all the characters that Jordan developed in that series, Matrim was to me, that had the most depth and the most, I guess, in a way, the most had the most realism about him. You know, what I mean, he actually, you can imagine the way his attitudes towards things. You can imagine yourself feeling that way, or at least people you've seen that in people more so than you saw in the other characters. But that's of course my opinion on the matter.
I love the sort of chaotic nature of his sort of luck thing. Like, there's so many good ideas in that series. Like, I mean, the feel of the White Tower, and like, the different infighting among the sorceresses, and then the world of dreams, and like the underground worlds, and like whatever, and the what were they called again? The sort of the weird bad lords who are always like fighting something with a D, I think.
Oh God.
Not the Defiled, something like that.
I wrote the first book of the Godling Chronicles, like not long after I had been reading a bunch of the Wheel of Time books, and I hadn't gotten to the Sanderson book yet, and I think he had just written or was about to release the first of the ones that he wrote, but thanks to that, and it must have rubbed off on me subconsciously, I started describing the hell out of clothing.
I'm tricky with too with the Wheel of Time was, I think 3 books were out when I first started reading it. So I read the first 3 books and it was like, damn, these are amazing. But then when you have to wait a year and a half or whatever between these giant books with 1 million characters, it's like trying to remember what happened, and you don't have the time to go back and reread up to now on the internet. Like on the later books, I would go to these sites and it would have like a 2-page summary, like what you need to know from the current state in order to begin book 13. Like,
What you forgot.
Yeah. But there's entire sites dedicated to the Wheel of Time series, and with like hundreds of thousands of people who participate, they know as much about the Robert Jordan world as some people know about the Middle Earth, and that all that mythology and
of course Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, I'm like because I've read the whole series like 4 or 5 times, and I watched the TV series like 5 times or whatever too. So my friends who are just TV show viewers would always call me up and go, "What's the relationship with those?" And I give the whole,
That's when you have to sit there and go, well, the thing is, you're not going to get it because at least 5 of the characters that are really important don't exist in the TV show.
Yes. Although,
you ever see a thing called Pitch Meeting? It's on YouTube. It's hilarious. Look up Pitch Meeting, Game of Thrones season 8. And he's like, "Yeah, we got to have this happen real fast." "No, we can give you more episodes." "No, got to finish it now." You know.
I think they were bored by the time they got to season 8. They were just like, nah.
Oh man, that was the most.
Themselves, like, there's actually a good writing lesson, structural problem there. So HBO themselves would have been happy to take many more seasons. But the showrunner
made the last season 8 twice as long.
Yeah, but the showrunners were tired, and I empathize with that because they've been their life for over 10 years, and I've been there with some projects like Crash Bandicoot.
You know what fixes that fatigue though? I got something that fixes that fatigue. More money.
But somehow they were at the limit of that or whatever psychologically. So it was their call to 2 6-episode seasons, or was it 8 and 6? I don't know, but the shorter ones. If they had just made the last 2 seasons full length, 10 episodes, that alone would have fixed a good chunk of the problems. But really, it maybe even needed an extra season or whatever. But so where they were going with the arcs, there's nothing that wrong with it, but the rate at which they had to do it in the last 2 seasons, and particularly in the final season, they did not have time to sell the Daenerys turn.
But the storytelling was just half-assed, though. I mean, it wasn't even. I mean, I do not believe Martin when he says he was in on that. I mean, because I just don't believe him. I think
he gave his thing, and they did what they wanted.
Well, I mean,
his thing
think
isn't
about the
even
way it
known.
ended. I mean, why would Daenerys all of a sudden go wipe out a bunch of people for no good goddamn reason? You know what I mean? Just for no reason, she went from 2 to 10 on the crazy scale. And
that's what Andy's saying, though. They didn't actually dedicate enough time to her her evilness.
I mean, why not have the three-eyed raven take control of the dragon, because that's what has to happen for him to be king or some shit like that. Something that at least makes sense with why you're bringing the three-eyed raven in as the main guy, which he hasn't been throughout the entire series, but now he's super duper important. You kill the Ice King and boom, that's it. With almost, you have the big battle, then you have just this one little stabby. That's it for the Ice King.
We spent 7 years building up some of these things, like as you said, the brand thing. In a lot of ways, in the terms of the big conflict with the Night's King, the brand thread is the most important counter thrust.
What about all those symbols and shit they drew? What?
Yeah, and they never used it. They it totally dropped. At certain level, you need it. Like, have you seen I can't remember what it's called, but like, there's a YouTuber who rewrote the battle, the episode where the Night King dies. I can't remember. Sort of re-edits it online, and with some actually relatively slight but incredibly important changes that makes it radically better. Where in his particular one, it's actually that Bran is the Night's King. He gets stuck he's trying to stop him, and he gets stuck in the past.
Anything would have been better than what they did. I mean, come on. I mean, really, it felt so rushed. And people who've been keeping up, I know they were tired, whatever, but there was people who had really stayed with this show for a lot of years, had been loyal to it, and they deserved better than what they got at the end. That's what I feel. You know what I mean?
You fire your showrunners because they're acting like dicks and not giving their all, and get some new
ones. And you don't hire Chris Chibnall. I probably shouldn't have said that.
Although sometimes
you did say
showrunner, like a recent example of of changing showrunners and totally going after us is Altered Carbon.
Oh
yeah.
The first season I loved, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And the second season is so awful.
Like the acting is good, but the story is terrible.
Yeah, it's the writing. Like the second season offers nothing interesting or new.
Well, I feel the same way about the latest Star Wars. You have Daisy Ridley is great. She's
a lot of great actors.
Keira Knightley could act, and
the technical directing, the pacing of it's fine. It's like, but the script was. It feels like you fed the first trilogy into an AI story generation algorithm.
Yeah, so everything's so disconnected, and I'm like, poor old Daisy Ridley. She is a good actress, but she was given such a weak, Mary Sue of a character that you like. There was no reason to do her that way. You could have had her training to meditate or some connection to the Force before she lifts 20 tons of boulders and does the Jedi mind trick and wins her first lightsaber battle ever. And there's no reason to do that to that character. There's no character development at all. So basically, you're hamstringing what is otherwise a good actor into a poor character.
It basically is just a rehash of feelings and elements from the original trilogy without actually having characters.
Yeah, right? And we don't want to do fan service. I'm like, well, who are you selling this to?
But that's all it was. I mean, it's if you go through and pull apart the second one, it's practically note for note Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, yeah.
The locations are slightly different. The characters are slightly different. You can see a little bit of maybe OG Lucas in there, what he originally envisioned for it, but it's almost a note for note retread, which if I'm going to piss off fans, I would much rather piss them off by making them something new than by retreading and missing the mark, which I think is like
you either do the fan service or don't. Either do it or don't. Either make it like an old style Star Wars movie or you don't. And everything's so disconnected in every aspect of that movie. There was no glue there. I mean, there was nothing to hold it together. And you bring back Lando Calrissian for what? You know what I mean? And,
Fan service.
And then every time you need a new power, the Force. I mean, we need to get past this giant worm that is inexplicably there for whoever knows why, and all of a sudden now we can heal the worm. Okay, that's a new power. We need to take matter and teleport it to another part of the Star Wars universe. Well, the Force can do that because, well, for reasons. You know what I mean? Because the story needs to happen.
It's also, there's no respect for. I actually have this problem with a lot of modern movies, but there's no respect for time. Because in the third one, the entire action appears to take place in about 15 hours. And there's this dramatic amount of stuff happening and distances crossed, and it's all shoved into 15 hours. Like, why can't they allow the passage of some time and a sense of some sort of weight and change that occurs with the time? When you try to rush all that into like a 24 episode, like there it actually has a purpose and really works in the original. You know where you can really see that done, and it's actually in an earlier movie, was the first Dune movie, where they tried to pack that entire novel into a 2-hour movie, and they didn't know how to do it, so they do a bunch of navel gazing and a bunch of that everybody whispers their inner thoughts for reasons. It's a highly flawed movie that David Lynch doing, and even David Lynch doesn't like it. But I actually kind of love that movie, but it has some really... Oh no, it's nostalgic as fuck to me. And it's like that line, the sleeper must awaken. And oh yeah. Well, the one they did on the Sci-Fi Channel was actually pretty true to the story. It's more boring and not as well acted as even like as the David Lynch one. I heard the new one's going to be incredible. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I love the Baron Harkonnen in David Lynch one, and like the shields, and we have Patrick Stewart.
You have Patrick Stewart and Sting.
Yeah, I joke like I jokingly like still think of Sting as Fade Routha or whatever. Oh yeah, of course.
But the disconnect going from Lynch's Patrick Stewart as Duncan Idaho, and now we've got Jason Momoa, we've got Aquaman as Duncan Idaho. I'm not. Really? Yeah.
Wow.
Jason
They know what they're
Momoa.
doing. They've never known what they were doing with that character in any of the versions that they've made so far. They're just like, and then there's this character who might be important.
So they're going to kill off Jason Momoa. Spoilers, by the way.
Don't need to bring him back.
Idaho never really dies, though. I mean, they just keep adding new robot parts onto him.
Well, in the later books, they bring him back as a clone.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and the later on in the story, but Duncan dies pretty early on, man. I mean, he doesn't make it very far. I mean, and if you haven't read, and if this is spoiler to you, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, and you haven't read Dune, go read Dune.
Yeah.
Don't read Dune. Don't. It's so hard to read.
It's a rite of passage, Rob.
Instead, read one of our books.
It's hazing from sci-fi writers.
I love the concept of Dune. I love the story of it. I can't get my head around his style of writing. It just doesn't work for me at all.
I mean, the spice has nothing to do with oil, and Arrakis is definitely not Iraq.
Jihad is a choice of words.
Yeah, it's just coincidence, you know, a lot of coincidence. You know? But I loved the what the Sci-Fi Channel did with it, because they did stay true to the story. And I'd read some of the ones I'd read all the ones that Herbert wrote himself, and some of the later ones that Kevin J. Anderson did with Brian Herbert. And I mean, they're all this. It's a great universe. He does a good job. I mean, it's one of those things though. I've noticed people either love Dune or they can't stand it.
I thought the first novel was amazing. It's still one of my all-time favorite science fiction books. The readability drops off precipitously after the first book, though.
Yeah, I haven't read Dune in a long time, and so it's like I reread. Remember ElfQuest when they
Yeah.
novelized ElfQuest?
I never read the
And
novels. I read the
Playboy
original.
actually did it originally. Then they sold it over to Berkeley Publishing, and I ordered a used copy of it online just because I just for the hell of it, and that was some shitty writing. That was just terrible. I'm like,
The original
whoa.
comics were awesome.
But I remember really liking it when I was a kid. You know, I'm like, well, okay, this didn't age well at all.
Did you reread the original comics or like the
No,
novels?
no. I had the novel. I had some of the original comics, but I remember there was a K&B drugstore across the street from my house that had a pretty big, pretty nice little book section. So, and I love science fiction and fantasy. So, every time they got something new in, I'd go get a mass market paperback of it, and because I lived in a little bitty town, so there wasn't a lot of options for me. I mean, the nearest B. Dalton bookstore was across the bay in Mobile. We didn't have a local library, so the bookmobile would come around. So, you know, I mean, that's not exactly the most exciting thing for a teenager to go get the classics. You know, I mean, you want to read something fun. So that's how I ended up reading like Piers Anthony and all those guys. But I'm gonna go over and see if there's any questions real quick, and I won't be able to hear y'all, but y'all can continue talking.
Awesome. Yeah, ElfQuest was one of those things. It was so much better as a graphic novel, but it's like if you read the light novels for like various manga, that you just translating a comic into a literary work is a special skill. It's almost like a translation skill, you know. So I'm you know, I read, God, for ElfQuest, I think I started with the novel and was not a fan, and so then I went back and found the comic books prior to that, and so
I read the comics when they were coming out, when they were still in black and white, and I loved them. But I was 12, I think.
yeah.
So,
Perhaps a little advanced in some places for 12 and 13.
oh, but I mean, even when I was like 10 or 11, I was reading novels like sort of 70s novels like Jaws and Alive and Brave New World or whatever. So I was just raiding the library for whatever. In fact, sometimes I would like ask adults like what kind of edgy good novels were, and then go find them in the library. Like Tropic of Cancer and Ruby Fruit Jungle when I was like 11 or 12 or something. So I was always a garbage reader.
Well, before we're getting closer to the witching hour. My son here, I would love for him to be able to ask Kimberly and Andy a question or two, because he's been like looking forward to this, you know, as a kid gamer.
Oh yeah. I'm honestly curious what y'all think as far as the whole COVID situation is going. How you think it's really affecting the industry right now? Because I know a lot of people are having to work from home, and it's been delaying a lot of release dates. Like the new Microsoft Halo game had to be delayed till next year and stuff like that.
So, some of those delays, I suspect, it was already being delayed. It's a little bit of an excuse.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there is transition for teams, but video gaming, like, it's better than a lot of industries in terms of being able to do it virtually. Like, there's technical issues because a lot of game teams on AAA games have to deal with tremendous amounts of data and security issues. Even when it was in the office, there's leaks and stuff. So there's issues to be solved, but the actual work, since it's fundamentally on computers, is early doable. There's tons and tons of other industries, anything from manufacturing to meat packing, consumer manufacturing, to a million other, to being a dentist or whatever, which do not scale virtually very well. And plus, at least the audience, video game playing is up even. So I think it's not going to have a big negative impact on video games. Just a lot of transitional learning and stuff. Maybe some ways.
Well, I think it's going to have some. I ultimately think it's going to have some positive impact, because there's been a little bit of a move to decentralize studios, particularly for the small studios, where you may have individuals working. We used to work in a modular fashion, so we'd farm out pieces of projects we were working on, then we'd assemble them all in-house, so nobody had the entire game on in our outside contractors and stuff. And the mindset of the industry has always been very open to sort of work from home, work off site, and I think that now it's locking in as a way to do things in a way that it might not have before. So I think we're going to be able to see talent from all over the world working together, as opposed to sort of localized pools of talent, which is honestly really exciting, because the more different pieces, the more different brains and the more different thought processes we can get involved, the cooler the stuff we come up with gets. Like,
small groups of people or even individuals who are in a place that did not have like big teams or big video game presence to work in games, even big ones. And
they're not Silicon Valley,
Well, there's a couple of clubs like Austin is a big cluster, Raleigh,
North Carolina.
LA has a decent number, and Silicon Valley and Seattle, huge numbers, and then various ones. Sure. Other places in the world and so on, but you could be almost anywhere and participate in, particularly on the art side.
Yeah.
Have y'all seen a ramp up in like the Zoom meetings, like what we're on right now? That type of technology, that sort of integrated technology. Have y'all seen y'all are deep into that. And Rob, have you seen any kind of change in what? Dealing with indie stuff that, has your, publishing changed?
To be honest, it's not really changed for me that much in that sort of sense. The main difference is I'm doing loads of podcasts and everything these days because there's no conventions anymore.
Oh, this got started, yeah.
So instead of sort of like going to those and doing, panels or just meetings or whatever, you just sort of, people are organizing things like this where it's like, either a podcast or a live thing or anything. So yeah, I've been on 4 different podcasts this week so far, which is it's insane.
They're more efficient than going to a con.
Oh yeah.
Going to a con takes a lot of days. Maybe it's more fun, but
it does.
Anything else you want to ask?
Ooh, because of some studies I've been looking at, they're saying that about quantum computing, how in the next 5 or so years we're actually going to have that to where it's going to be a bit more of the norm. I was wondering how y'all think that's going to affect gaming, as far as I know development, it'll probably help a lot, but do you think we might get a major increase in graphics wise?
I don't know if quantum computing is going to affect the graphics per se. I think it's going to lean more towards affecting the back end stuff, the server side. The shoveling the data back and forth, handling massive numbers of users, as opposed to just upping the rendering quality, improving the graphics. I think they're very different animals.
I don't think it's 5 years really either. There might be, in that time frame, it's possible we might have some specialized chips that do specific things. Like you might have some kind of content storage thing that has a higher density storage or something like that. But I don't think your computer on your desktop, or your laptop, or even a server computer is going to be a fundamentally quantum computer in 5 years. First of all, the lead time on a new CPU or graphics unit in one of the computer that on your desk now or whatever was 5 years. So, and they're not going into into early manufacturing and stuff now. They're still quite experimental. So I suspect you'll first see it in these small specialized kind of tip niches, but it might be, it does image processing for cell phone cameras, or
it'll have the material sciences. Once we get to that point where you can have X amount of qubits that you need, if it can come up with different materials. That's the great thing about quantum computing, is the modeling. It can they're looking for it to model the carbon cycle, but to make superconductors and different things that would help computing in the gaming industry would accelerate a lot of things.
It takes a little while to percolate up each of these displays. So I'm on the board of a nanomaterial semiconductor company, And
Using graphene a lot, or
what was that?
graphene stuff like that.
No, ours is mostly like zirconium. But like there's at least like 3 to 5 years lead time. Well, with these materials, like we were found in 1997, and still things are like in. It's just a very long lead time from like a material, from being able to like to getting it in a mass-produced semiconductor product. Even something like the new displays that are coming out, like OLEDs and like micro LEDs and stuff, are new display things that are OLEDs are relatively recent. Micro LEDs are sort of a next stage one. They're at least like 5 years like in the pipeline, because these fab factories, like the LG and Toshiba and whatever, like factories that produce these high-tech displays. That's another area where there's a lot of active development actually related to Oculus, like the VR, AR, was pushing small micro display technology, and a lot of stuff having to do with the optics, because the being right up against your face has very different like optic properties than like a traditional. But there's they're in this pipe for a while, like from the early technologies to actually being like usable screen or usable chip, whatever. The graphics chips are improving continuously and tremendously. I mean, you've seen the Unreal 5 demo with like female character in the desert environment or whatever, and it's a sort of PS5-ish ray tracing display. Like, it's not that the resolution is that much greater, but and I actually don't think you need that much more resolution on a regular TV, because it's like, given the distances with the resolvability, but it's the lighting model there that is just like,
and we could do a whole show on just stuff like that. Unfortunately, the hour is up. And I tell you what, this has been one of the best shows we've had so far. I really want to thank Kimberly Unger, Rob Hayes, and Andy Gavin for joining me, and my son for actually coming home in time to participate in the show. I don't see him much. He's a senior in high school, and Dad's not cool anymore.
Please. I'm cool again.
Yeah, that's right.
Even, I got the way cool biker yarmulke going on here, That's because my hair was wet. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming on. I'm going to put all this up on YouTube later. I edit in a nice little intro, and you'll be able to buy books from Kimberly Unger, Rob Hayes, and Andy Gavin by just making a click. It'll take you right to their sites, and you can purchase one of their fine books. And don't forget to buy one of mine. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it, and we'll see everybody next week on After the Con.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you very much for putting it together.